Welcome back to the poker vlog. This is episode number 276. For this one, we're playing a 5-10 session at the Win, but it's perhaps the most epic battle that I've ever vlogged, so I can't wait to share it with you guys. But before we get started, I have a couple of announcements to make. The first one is that pokercoaching.com is having its biggest sale of the year for Black Friday. For a limited time, you can get up to 70% off a premium subscription. Not only do they have phenomenal tournament content on there to help you run deep in tournaments, final table, and win, but they just came out with this brand new advanced cash games course that you'll have access to with a premium subscription. The lead instructor on that is none other than Chris Brewer. He's a top 5 tournament player, but he's a phenomenal cash game player as well. He just won 2 gold bracelets in this most recent WSOP. He has over 20 million in live earnings, and with this course, you get over 30 hours of content. You learn how to navigate multi-way pots, which is really tricky in some instances and very, very common in a lot of lower stakes games. So in 1-2 and 2-5, even 5-10 games, there are a lot of multi-way pots because people are just calling pre-flop raises at a very, very high frequency. And then as you get into higher and higher stakes, there's more 3 and 4 betting, but you also learn a lot of GTO strategy, pre-flop charts, bet sizing, which is something that I still struggle with, and you really learn from some of the absolute best players in the world. Jonathan Little is an instructor as well. He has over 8 million in live earnings. He just won a big tournament recently and got second in a Poker Go tournament, and he's a WPT main event winner. And then Justin Saliba, he's perhaps the most interesting story within poker coaching. I first met him about 5 years ago. He was an intern at the time with the site, and since then, he's just had a meteoric rise, playing and winning all kinds of massive events, including high rollers. He's won 2 bracelets since I met him, just applying concepts that he learned from poker coaching. And now he's an instructor and giving advice on tournaments and cash games. This site has helped me a ton in my own play, particularly in 2020 when I was just starting to play tournaments more. And now that I have my deal with WPT, I've had some really big cashes, 6-figure score, and multiple big final tables, and a lot of that is from the stuff that I learned from this site that I've carried with me over the years. So I'm a big proponent of studying and using training sites and all the tools that they have to offer, and seeing Justin has just been really, really inspiring me to study more. I think that there's almost no chance that you're going to study this stuff and not get all your money back and then some if you really understand and apply the concepts that they're teaching you. So take advantage of that. I have a link down below in the description box, and I really think it'll help improve your game. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. We're on the Strip in Las Vegas, anxious to play a session. I still get amped up every time I'm on my way to the casino, wondering who's going to be at the table and whether or not the cards will fall in our favor. We'll be playing at the Win Poker Room, which is on the Encore side of the property. There's no beating this environment. It's top-notch in every possible aspect. It's the home of the WPT World Championship this December. My name gets called for the 2-5 initially. I buy in for 1,500. That's the max. But the game I enjoy playing the most right now is 5-10. After only getting dealt 2 hands, my name gets called for the higher stakes. I add on for 1,500 more to get up to the 3K max for 5-10. It's a brand new must move. The real session begins 3-handed at 1:14 in the afternoon. 3-handed isn't exactly my specialty, but I'm hoping if we build it, they will come. We pick up ace-queen offsuit early on. A few more players have showed up, so it's 5-handed now. Under the gun, raises to 30. The opponent is Boston Jimmy, who I've known for a long time and I've played quite a bit with. I make the call in position. We're heads up. The flop comes ace-8 deuce. We've got top pair and a kicker that's sneakily good since we elected not to 3-bet pre-flop. Under the gun knows ace-high flop should be better for his range. He bets 40. In this instance, we're not too upset to see the ace out there at all. I call with what's likely the best hand. The turn is the jack of clubs, putting a flush draw on the board, but a lot of the highest clubs are accounted for, so there's not too much to be worried about. What concerns me at least a little is that the opponent bets 130. It's nearly a pot-sized bet. He could be doing this with a variety of bluffs, including Broadway draws, or he could have a real hand like a set or 2-pair. Our hand still feels under-repped. I call to see a river. The dealer puts out the ace of spades. We improve to trips. We've got a monster. The opponent slows down and checks. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. If he flopped or turned a set, it'd be a good card for him to check because fairly often I'll have trips, he can put in a check raise. But not going for value is absurd. I bet 300, thinking that I can get called by worse aces. There's no call this time. The opponent follows through with the check raise at 1200. It's time to abort. We could be up against ace-jack or pocket eights, or even ace-king. We're not really beating any of the hands that under the gun would play this way for value. You'd probably just call with ace-10 or worse. I'm annoyed that I went with somewhat of a large river sizing, and I need to properly punish myself. The best way to do that is to make sure I lose even more money.
Hello? Yeah.
I said.
It's a frustrating run out, but I probably should have bet smaller on the river or not called the raise. I told myself I wasn't going to call a raise before it happened, then leveled myself after thinking the opponent might think a board with two aces and a jack would be better for him. Trips versus a full house is a cooler no matter what. Still, I know if I'm playing my best, I can get away from it. Instead, I'm stuck 1400 immediately and add on. I get switched to the must move where we've got pocket sixes in the big blind. The middle position player raises to 30. The button calls, it's only 20 more for us. I call as well. 3 of us are seeing the flop. It comes ace-6-5 with 2 clubs. We've got middle set and multiple opponents. I check. The initial pre-flop raiser is very generous. He donates $30 to our live GoFundMe. Not to be outdone, the button matches the donation. While I appreciate their contributions, we're a destitute case and need more to get unstuck. I raised to 130. The middle position player doesn't like the spot that he's found himself in. He folds. The button may have an ace or a strong draw. He makes the call for 100 more. It's down to heads up. The turn is the deuce of hearts, putting a second flush draw on the board. Otherwise, it's mostly a blank, since it's unlikely our opponent has 4-3 for a straight. There are a lot of draws out there. We need to get as much money in now while we probably have the lead or before a scare card comes out killing the action. I bet 400. It's a slight overbet. The opponent has a massive stack of over 8,000. He's the Warren Buffett of this 5-10 table. He can afford to get some money in bad. He calls once again, making this a substantial pot. The river is the 5 of clubs, pairing the board to give us a full house while completing the front door flush draw. It's the perfect card to win the max from an opponent who very easily could have improved to a hand that'll decimate his stack. If the opponent only has an ace, he probably won't want to call a river bet of any sizing, since he no longer even beats most hands that I might have check raised with as a semi-bluff on the flop. I bet 1300 to target ace-5, 6-5, and clubs. The opponent called an overbet on the turn. I don't see why he wouldn't here. I can see it in his eyes as he ponders his decision that he doesn't want to let go of what he's got. 1300 ends up being just slightly too much. He folds. It's too bad we aren't able to get out of the hole all in one hand. We at least get a nice chunk back though. The opponent tells me that he had ace-deuce, he turned 2 pair and got counterfeited on the river. It's tough to make much additional money when he essentially has top pair and no kicker. Next we have 6-3 suited in the big blind. I get switched to a new seat with a working phone charger. I hate losing more than almost anything, so I anticipate possibly having to be here for a long time to get unstuck. It's imperative that the phone has enough juice to capture the entire session. The small blind raises to 40. It's the same opponent who folded to the river when we made a boat with 6s full. He's now on my direct right. I call for 30 more. We're heads up. The flop comes 7-5-4 with 2 spades. We flop the straight. The small blind feels bad for not giving us more money in the other hand that we went over. He tries to make up for it by betting 40. There's a good chance that he has air or is drawing slim. I call to keep his bluffs in. The turn is the 8 of spades. It's one of the worst cards in the deck. We get downgraded quite a bit and our straight is no longer hidden. The small blind checks. He probably would have bet if he had a flush or a straight, so we should still have the best hand, but we need to get lots of money in on this street. I bet 120 for value. I get the sense that the opponent has a spade in his hand, or perhaps 2 pair or a set that he wants to see a river with. He calls. We need a blank. Instead, the river is the 7 of spades. It's tough for there to be a worse run out after an amazing flop. The small blind checks. I'm not sure what we get value out of. I give up and check back. The small blind shows pocket 9s with the 9 of spades. He gets the win. We were a 91% favorite on the flop. It only matters how the hand ends though. At least it isn't too big of a pot that we lost. We've got some work to do as we pick up king-jack suited in the small blind with the straddle on. The cutoff raises to 50. He's an ultra-aggressive Spanish player that you may remember we played with in a recent vlog from Bellagio. He check-raised me twice in the same hand on a 10-high board. Then on the turn, I 3-bet jammed for barely anything more and he snap-folded, indicating he was attempting a wild bluff. Back to this hand, we're in a pure 3-bet situation. I re-raised to 240. I know the cutoff doesn't like folding, so I'm not too surprised if he calls for 190 more. There's already a large pot, we're heads up out of position against a good pro. This could get tricky. The flop comes Queen 6 deuce with 2 spades. We've at least got equity with a strong draw and an overcard. We need to keep the pressure on. I bet 250. It's about half the pot. Living up to the opponent's reputation, he raises to 630. I've seen this movie before. I'm fully aware of the cutoff's nature and his relentless aggression. Against someone whose raises will be weighted more towards really strong hands, I'd be inclined to call in order to keep the pot small until we actually make a strong hand. Having the history I have with the cutoff, knowing he's raised me with air in the past and folded to re-raises, I'm going to fight fire with fire. I 3-bet rip it in for 2,975 total. The opponent snap folds. We get the semi-bluff through to profit about 900 with our move, holding only king high. The cutoff says that he had an easy decision to fold with ace deuce. I never let him know that he had the best hand on the flop. Being familiar with the opponent's tendencies and tailoring a plan to counter him allows us to take down a big pot, which gets our stack up to 4,100. I'm only down 300 now, and can see on the GPS the profit bill is only one town over. About 10 minutes later, we've got ace queen of hearts in the cutoff. The straddle's on again. I raised to 50. There's an older viewer in the big blind who plays recreationally. He puts in a small 3-bet to 150. It's not that much more for us. I call to play in position. The flop comes ace 3-3 with 2 spades. We've got top pair and a strong kicker. The big blind checks, indicating that he doesn't like the flop much. Sometimes opponents will do this if they have a monster like pocket aces, but 2 aces are accounted for, so there's only one possible combination of that hand. The opponent could still have ace king, kings or queens. We don't want to build the pot in case we're losing to ace king, and kings and queens will hate seeing the ace out there, so I check back to keep the pot small in case we're losing, while feigning weakness in order to potentially get more money down the line from combinations that are drawing nearly dead. The turn is the queen of spades, improving us the top 2 pair. The big blind puts out a tiny bet of 70. We can't allow the opponent to see a river card for that price with 3 spades on the board. He could have pocket kings or ace king with the king of spades. I raised to 220 to make it a real amount. The big blind is down to get really real. He re-raises to 620. I mentioned earlier, he's an older rec player. He doesn't strike me as the type to get out of line 3-betting me with medium suited connectors or anything like that. And the ace and queen of spades are accounted for, so I don't put him on a flush. We've got removal of pocket aces and pocket queens, making it incredibly unlikely that we'd be up against those 2 hands. The opponent only has 1270 remaining in the stack, so I contemplate jamming because the most likely hand that we'll be up against is ace king with the king of spades. The line he's taking is very indicative of a flopped or turned full house, so even though the chance of us being beat right now is minimal, I call for 400 more to keep the pot smaller just in case, and to potentially allow the opponent to keep bluffing with kings in the rare instances he's being overly aggressive with that hand. The river is the deuce of hearts. It's blanker than Garrett's face when he sees Jack 4 offsuit get tabled to win a 6-figure pot. I'll happily call off a jam from the opponent for 1270. Instead, the big blind down bets to 600. He may have bitten off more than he could chew with that re-raise on the turn, and the fact that I called him set off some alarm bells that his ace king is no good. Now he wants to get to showdown for a discount. As confident as I am that we've got the best hand and should rip it for value, there's still some possibility that we could be losing. I wimp out and just call. I'm glad we didn't rip it because the opponent shows pocket aces, drilling the last ace in the deck, and getting almost the best turn card possible for him to win the maximum, but he somehow manages not to get the full double up. It's one more brutal run out that causes us to lose almost 1,400 more. The deck isn't our friend at all this session. I'm stuck about 2,000 and we're down ace king offsuit on the button. A player who just came over from the must move raises to 30 from under the gun. Under the gun +1 calls. Ace king isn't the type of hand that we want to go multiple ways to a flop with. I 3-bet to 160 in order to win it without seeing a flop or to narrow it down to heads up. Under the gun calls for 130 more. It's too much for under the gun +1. He folds. We get what we wanted. We're heads up in position. The flop comes ace 8-6 rainbow. We've got top in a situation where we should have the lead by a mile, except in the rare instances the opponent has a set of 8s or 6s. Under the gun checks. With a similar thought process to the last hand that we went over, I check back to keep the pot smaller when we're beat and allow the opponent an opportunity to bluff on future streets if he mistakenly assumes that we won't be strong after checking. The turn is the 7 of clubs. I don't have any strong feelings either way towards seeing that card. Pocket 7s improves to have us beat, and under the gun could have picked up a straight draw with a few other pocket pairs, but it shouldn't have changed much. The opponent bets 200. We checked back turns to induce bluffs. I call, hoping that's what's going on right now, or maybe under the gun could even have an ace with a worse kicker. The river is the 4 of spades, putting 4 to the straight on board, but it's very unlikely that the opponent has a 5 in his hand. The 4 doesn't scare the opponent, he bets 500. There are a number of ways that we could be beat, but we can't under-rep our hand on the flop, check back for pot control, and fold once we see 2 reasonably sized bets. The opponent might even be value betting ace-queen here if he thinks I have kings or queens. I call, the opponent says that he has 2 pair, he shows ace-8 of clubs, he has outflopped and wins a big pot. Maybe I could have folded to the river and saved 500, but it's hard to wrap my head around how often I'm running into monsters. I'm just continuously finding ways to get totally wrecked, but I'm only down about 1 buy-in. Things can change quickly. After adding on again, I pick up 8-7 suited in the hijack. I'm in for 5,900 total on the day. The player in middle position raises to 30. We're certainly not going to get unstuck by playing single raised pots. I 3-bet to 100, even though folding is really the best option. The big blind wants to get involved. He puts in the cold 4-bet to 360. I saw him 4-bet ace-queen offsuit in a hand earlier in a spot that I thought was suspect, so he's not necessarily going to just have aces or kings. The initial pre-flop raiser folds. We're playing deep with a chance to see a flop in position with a hand that'll often connect well. I call for 260 more, maybe it's our time to get lucky. The dealer puts out 6-5-3 rainbow, we've got a hidden open-ended straight draw. The big blind down bets at 300. Maybe he has an overpair, but he could just have ace high. If he has an overpair, he won't fold if I raise because I won't be able to rep anything credible since I wouldn't have 3-bet and called a 4-bet with a small pocket pair that improved the sets on this flop. If I raise, I could get some ace-high hands to fold, but those hands will check on the turn anyway, and then I can bet at that point to represent pairs of queens, jacks, and 10s. 300 is a good cheap price for us to see a turn. I call with plans of making a move on the next street if we get a good opportunity. The turn is the jack of clubs. At some point in the session, maybe we'll get a card that'll give us the nuts, but this one isn't it. We see an opening though. The opponent checks. He could have ace-highs like we suspected after all. The jack falls firmly in our 4-bet calling range pre-flop. In fact, if you asked the opponent what he thought we had 30 seconds ago, he'd probably be like, that dude definitely has the 2-piece McJiggities. I bet 750 as a semi-bluff to get ace-king and ace-queen type of hands to fold. If the opponent has an overpair, he'll probably just call because this isn't a good turn for him. I have bad news, the opponent doesn't make the call. He rips it in my stupid face for 1,400 more. He has me covered. Even if he showed me ace-king of clubs right now, I'd still have to fold because I'm not getting the right price. I have no choice. I let it go and lose over 1,400 in a completely unnecessary way. I could have folded pre-flop and avoided all of that, but this is the first time in the session that I tried to force it with a speculative hand and it completely backfires. This is when our Spanish opponent, who wasn't in the hand, gets creative and tries to use the fact that I'm filming to gain information.
No bluff? You don't have to, it's up to you.
You're brought on? No.
Nice hand. Thanks, man. Yeah.
The opponent showed pocket kings for the best hand. I find another interesting way to lose a lot of money. I can justify losing big amounts in those other situations, but this one is fully attributed to me playing worse because I'm losing. I should probably call it because it's not my day and I'm not playing that well, but I know the card distribution has to turn around eventually. There are a few people who said hi to me earlier that are at the must move just to hopefully make it to the main game in order to get a chance at my money, and I'm giving it away just like the Red Hot Chili Peppers told me to, so there's a high likelihood that they'll walk away with some of it if I wait for them to get over. But above all, there's nothing I like less than walking out of the casino with less money than I walked in with, so for that reason, I'm staying. I add on for 1,600 more, I'm in for 7,500 total. We look down at ace-2 suited and under the gun straddle. Under the gun +1 raises to 50. He's a good high-stakes player from Belarus. He's down several thousand as well. We've been commiserating with each other about being stuck piles, although I haven't beat since I've got $4,640 to recover somehow. I'm the biggest loser in the game at the moment. A player in middle position calls the pre-flop raise. The big blind calls as well. We're closing the action. I call for 30 more to see if we can turn things around. The flop comes 8-5-3 rainbow. We've got a gutter, 1 over, and a backdoor flush draw. The big blind checks. I check to the initial pre-flop raiser. It doesn't take him too long to continue with a small sizing of 100. The player in middle position folds. The big blind makes a lot of light calls. He comes through with a call here. This flop shouldn't have connected very well with under the gun +1's range. The big blind should have raised with 2 pair better. We've got a hand that'll improve with a lot of turn cards, but right now, it's almost worthless. I just don't want to get rid of it. I check raised to 400. The problem with even being at the table right now is that my image is terrible and no one has seen me win a significant hand for a long time, so no one consciously or subconsciously thinks of me as a winner, and my bluffs are less likely to be successful because of that. Luckily, under the gun +1 folds, my assessment of his hand strength is accurate. The big blind folds as well, we get it through. There have been so few times that we've been able to bet or raise for value today. We're 5 hours in and still haven't been dealt any premium pocket pairs. We just have had a lot of strong but second best hands. Feels good to win with ace high though. A few hands later, we've got queen jack suited on the button with the straddle on. Our Spanish friend raises to 50 from the hijack. Our hand is definitely playable. We can mix in 3-betting or calling. I call the 50. The big blind isn't aware that I have a YouTube channel, but he somehow knows me from TikTok. He calls for 40 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes 8-5-4 with 2 hearts. We've got a flush draw with 2 overs and a backdoor straight draw. Checks to us. I could go either way with checking or betting. Because my credibility is so low and our draw isn't to the nuts, I'm not as inclined to semi-bluff. I check back to ensure that we at least get to the turn. The dealer puts out the queen of diamonds, giving us top pair to go along with our draw. The big blind wants his pot to go to him. He bets 120. The hijack doesn't have anything. He folds quickly. I'm concerned the big blind might have 2 pair or better. Still, we should have some outs. I call to see if we can hit something. The river's the jack of spades and the big blind immediately puts out a bet of 180. I thought there was some chance that he might have had a set or straight, but after seeing a snap bet with a sizing of less than half the pot, I get the sense that we've got the best hand. The opponent probably would have taken his time to consider how much to wager if he had something close to the nuts. This live read makes me confident that we can raise for value. I make it 500. I'm not sure that was a great idea. The opponent immediately grabs additional chips. He makes the call. We show him that we rivered top 2 pair. He's flabbergasted, but he's willing to show you guys what he made the call with.
The camera.
King queen. Yeah, I got lucky. It's the first good run out for me today.
We win a few hundred extra after making a key observation that allows us to feel more comfortable raising. This is only the second significant pot that we've won with a real hand on the river, and it's the biggest pot that's come our way aside from the semi-bluff with king jack of spades, but even with this one, I'm still stuck 3,500. Getting back to even may not be feasible anymore. Hopefully I can at least limit the damage to make it a more respectable loss. 2.5 hours later, we're dealt 8-7 suited under the gun. I raised to 30. The stack has slipped a little, so we're no closer to the even mark. The big blind is a viewer from North Carolina named Evan. He's currently going to school at Duke, but he's on vacation and he's made it abundantly clear that he wants some Bradley dollars. Evan 3-bets to 150. Evan 4-bet me with ace-3 offsuit in a blind versus blind hand when I had ace-jack that resulted in a chop when we both made the wheel. He has absolutely zero credibility with his raises and re-raises. He told me that he wanted to make the vlog, and I'm willing to give him an opportunity to make it. I call for 120 more. 8-7 suited got us in trouble earlier. Maybe it'll get us out of trouble now. Or way deeper into more trouble. The flop comes king 8-3 rainbow. We've got middle pair and a backdoor spade draw. Knowing that the opponent is capable of 4-betting ace-3 offsuit, we could easily have him beat with our 1 pair on this flop. The opponent down bets a 70. That's the perfect amount for us to stay in there. I call. There are a lot of cards that'll help us improve. The turn is the jack of spades, giving us the flush draw. It's time for Evan to really unload now that there are a lot of potential draws present. He bets 300. Evan only has 750 behind. I'm not sure if he actually has what he's representing, which is ace-king or better. What I do know is that if our pair of eights is best right now, the young Blue Devil will almost for sure have outs. And if we're not beat, we'll for sure have outs. I like this kid, but at the moment, I'm down piles of money and I'm not here to mess around. I ripped in the opponent's face for 1,050, taking a page from my old friend Cosmo's playbook.
I go hard in the paint like MJ as a target.
Evan tried to bumble with the B and he gets stung. His hand isn't that strong after all. He folds. Our pair of eights were probably best. We get the value semi-bluff through to win several hundred without having to see the river. I show our third pair to give him a sneak preview of what he's going to see on the vlog and in his nightmares later on in the night. He's still down way less than me in 510 today, but boom, take that, Evan. You just got Lewis lit up. We go on another several hour long drought, trash hands, before picking up ace-queen offsuit on the button. The hijack raises to 30. He's got the shortest stack at the table and appears to be a recreational player. I'd like to isolate him. 3-bet to 100. If we get called, we'll see a flop in position with a relatively strong hand. If the opponent folds, we win $45 without having to make a pair. We just don't want to get 4-bet. The hijack calls for 70 more, we're heads up, the flop comes 8-7-6 all diamonds, we've got the ace high flush draw and 2 overs. The hijack checks, we're going to be betting the majority of the time with the ace of diamonds, and we don't need to go with a large sizing because we've got a key blocker, so the opponent should almost never be check raising us on this flop. I bet 60. I'm somewhat indifferent as to whether or not the opponent calls. The hijack throws a curveball and check raises to 160. He only has 700 total. I have no idea what he's raising us with, but I know what he definitely doesn't have. As long as we're not up against a straight flush, we'll have outs. I jam for 700 effective. I'm almost 10 hours into a session in which I'm already down 4,000. I'm more than happy to gamble in this spot. Even if the opponent calls and we lose, it'll be a drop in the bucket. The hijack has taken a long time considering his options. He's definitely not super strong and is now realizing his misstep. I'd never do this with an ace or king high flush, by the way. I would have flatted to allow the opponent an opportunity to continue firing on the turn. If I were up against a professional poker player, I would have just flatted the raise rather than jam. Occasionally I'd make this play with pocket aces and the ace of diamonds though, so there are at least some strong hands that he has to be worried about no matter what. The opponent clearly has a tough decision, but he ultimately folds. We get another bluff shoved through. I'd much rather have real hands that I make these plays with. It just hasn't been the case for us where we've been in situations to go for value shoves. It's been a struggle just to hover around this minus 4,000 mark that we've been at for longer than I'd like. The clock is about to strike midnight as we pick up ace-king offsuit under the gun +1. We've had this hand a few times today, but it hasn't helped us much up to this point. I raised to 30. There's a solid pro named Brian who's originally from Boston in the cutoff. He 3-bets to 100. He's 3-bet me multiple times today, including as a squeeze from the big blind with pocket eights that got to showdown. 3-bet squeezing pocket eights in that particular spot is only supposed to be done at a very small frequency, and the fact that Brian went for it tells me that he's certainly making aggressive plays more than most people would. Because of that, I'm going to 4-bet at a higher frequency, and the opponent knows it. I re-raised to 330. This is actually the second time in a row that he's 3-bet me, and I 4-bet him with ace-king offsuit. On the other hand, he folded quickly, and it didn't get to showdown. He may be tired of me 4-betting. He 5-bets to 700. Sure, he could have aces or kings, but we have removal of those holdings, and if the opponent is capable of 3-betting me light, he's likely capable of 5-betting me at a higher than normal frequency as well. The cutoff has 3120 total in his stack. We have him covered. There are multiple combos of ace-4 and ace-5 suited that he might be doing this with, in addition to the 9 possible combinations of ace-king that he could have that we're tied with. With an ace and a king accounted for, there are only 3 combinations of each of those holdings that have us in bad shape, and really only aces have us completely crushed. We still have a 30% chance of winning against kings. I don't want to call and play a huge pot out of position. I want to force the cutoff to make the tough decision if we're both holding the same cards, which we probably are.
On all of them. I gotta use Ivy covered. I like 3,800.
There's no snap call, so we're definitely not up against pocket aces. I'm more and more certain that the opponent has the same hand. I'm rooting for a fold just to avoid the chop. He may have too much invested. He puts in a calling chip.
Calls it. Probably chopping, I assume, or kings?
We're up against pocket kings. It's the worst case scenario after the opponent understandably hesitated before calling the massive 6-bet shove. But we're still going to win this almost 1 in 3 times. If I wasn't 11 hours into the session and stuck $3,700, running it twice would be a lot more appealing. At the moment, the idea of possibly chopping this makes me sick, and I prefer to do whatever I can to reduce the chances of us splitting the pot. What may not be apparent is that I'm basically emotionally free-rolling the outcome of this hand. If I lose and I'm down 7,000, that won't make me feel much worse than being down 3,700 like I am right now. 3,700 and 7,000 will both be stored in my brain as big losses, and I'll process them about the same. If I win on the other hand, and I manage to get almost completely out of the hole after playing 11 hours and being stuck 4,700 at the low point, I'll be ecstatic. If the opponent were a recreational player, I'd be more inclined to leave the decision up to him, but he's a pro who has a lead in this instance, and he's asked me what I want to do. I'm in the mood to gamble.
Let's just go once.
Okay. One time.
We're risking everything to win a pot of over 6,200, and we're going to need some help. We've had some brutal runouts and multiple pots earlier today that have cost me a lot of money. Maybe we can get lucky and get some back. The flop comes Jack 9-7 with 2 diamonds. It's looking extremely bleak since we only have 2 more chances at hitting an ace. Maybe we should run it twice after all. The only silver lining is that we have backdoor diamonds and a backdoor Broadway draw. The turn is the 10 of hearts. It's an interesting card because an 8 will allow us to chop, and any queen will give us a straight, but our diamond draw is dead, and we only have one last shot to improve. I've seen wilder things happen, but the way things have been going, it's hard to be too optimistic. If I win, I'll barely be down at all. If I lose, I'll have the worst losing session that I've ever had in a 5-10 game. It's difficult to even watch.
Wow.
That ace-king is going to win. Ace-king is going to win.
Play him in yellow.
Okay, you got it.
We get the Miracle River card right when we need it most. They ask for a count on my stack just to make sure that I have the opponent covered. I put my stack in the middle so everyone can get an accurate look to confirm that I've got a few hundred more. Running it one time pays off massively, but I lost a few years of my life sweating the turn in the river. If we hadn't had a number of 3 and 4 bet situations come up previously in the session with this particular opponent, I probably wouldn't have been inclined to 6-bet jam, but the dynamics led me to believe that was the best play in the moment. I put us in a situation where we had to get lucky in order to win. It's not necessarily how I prefer to do things, but for the first time today, something goes our way in a gigantic pot. This win gets our stack to $6,900, we're only down $600, and booking a profitable session is within reach, so I'm going to give it my all to make that happen. There's a whole new energy now. Before, I just wanted to make the loss more manageable. That's been accomplished. Now it really feels like we can win. If you're feeling bad at all for Brian, don't worry. Less than 10 minutes after our hand with him, he stacked someone for about the same amount with pocket aces against pocket kings. They actually did run it twice, and on the second run out, 3 clubs came on the flop. Brian didn't have a club, but his opponent had the king of clubs for the flush draw. The turn was a king, giving Brian's opponent the lead. Then the river was an offsuit ace. Brian rivered a 1-outer to scoop a $6,000 pot rather than chop. Brian and I have the 2 biggest stacks at the table as we look down at ace-9 of clubs on the button. The straddle's on. We're going to be playing this one. I raised it 50. The straddler is none other than your boy Brian. He needs to get some revenge. He 3-bets to 220. I told you before that he once 3-bet in a similar situation with pocket 8s, so we could potentially have 2 overs or the best hand if he's re-raising smaller Broadway cards. Ace-9 suited easily falls into our 3-bet calling range. I put the 220 out there, looking for some clubs. We're heads up in position with piles potentially at risk. The flop comes Queen 10-9 rainbow. We've got bottom pair and 1 club on a board that'll be pretty decent for our range. The opponent checks. I prefer to take control of this pot. There are some decent cards that'll allow us to improve on the turn, and if we bet here, it helps open things up for us if we get the sense that the only way we'll be able to win on future streets is by bluffing. I bet 220. If we checked back, it would exude a lot of weakness, and the opponent could bet big on most turns and rivers with complete air if he wanted to, knowing that I'll rarely have top pair or better. The opponent calls. There's some chance that he's doing this with king jack or top set, but it feels more like kings, ace queen, or pocket jacks. The turn is the 9 of hearts, giving us the completely hidden trips. Under the gun checks. It seems things are finally going our way. We've waited out multiple card dead droughts, and we're making big hands in key moments. I bet 500. If the opponent calls and we win this pot, we'll be totally out of the hole that we've been in for 12 hours. Under the gun calls. It's still not 100% clear that we have the best hand because there's a slight possibility that we're up against a straight or a full house. The river is the 4 diamonds. It's a complete blank. The opponent checks. I'm not entirely sure what he has, but my best guess is ace queen or pocket kings, given how this has been played and what we have removal for. I'm glad that we made the decision to bet flop because now we're playing a much larger pot with a monster, and we're in a situation to bet big on the river for value. I make it 1,300 to go. Our opponent only thinks for about a second, then flicks in a call. We show him that we turned trips, and we were betting for value. Brian mucks his cards. It's another huge pot. We got lucky against him again. He tells me that he had pocket aces, which makes a lot of sense. Not only do we get out of an almost $5,000 deficit, this win gets our stack up to $9,200. We're winning $1,700. It's been a completely wild session, and it's about to get even wilder. The very next hand we pick up pocket aces in the cutoff. We haven't seen aces or kings all day after being dealt several hundred hands in the longest cash game session that I've ever played while vlogging. The straddle's on. Under the gun +1 limps in. A pro in middle position raises to 100. After being down huge the entire session, we're up a good amount with a chance to add to it. I raised to 300. This would be a fun time to see a limp 4-bet from under the gun +1. It doesn't happen. He folds. The player in middle position looks like he's considering 4-betting though. Instead he calls. Since we've got 2 of the aces accounted for, it's more likely our opponent has a middle to high pocket pair. We're heads up in position, the flop comes Jack deuce deuce with 2 spades, we've got the ace of spades. As long as the middle position player doesn't have pocket jacks, we should have a commanding lead. The opponent checks, there's not really anything to worry about. I down bet to 230 to keep in as many combinations from the opponent as possible. In the off chance that we're up against a flopped full house, the small bet allows us to keep the pot more manageable while we retain control as well. The opponent calls, you'd still have a number of worse pocket pairs or other combinations that are drawing slim. The turn is the queen of spades, we pick up a flush draw, but it's not significant since we already beat every other 2-pair hand anyway. The middle position player checks. I don't like seeing the queen out there for a variety of reasons. In a 3-bet pot, it's more likely that the opponent could either have jacks full or now queens full. But even if the opponent doesn't, worse hands like 10s, 9s, and 8s are all downgraded to 3rd pair. Plus, the opponent would have to be worried that we could have a flush in addition to full houses, over pairs, and top pairs. There just aren't a ton of worse hands in the opponent's range that'll be willing to call a bet, and we might be beat, so I check back for pot control and to induce bluffs. The river is the 6 of clubs, it's a blank. The opponent is grabbing chips, he goes with a fairly big sizing in 900. We're mostly just beating bluffs, but we played the hand passively post-flop, and our hand is under-repped. With the ace of spades in our hand, we don't need to be too concerned about being beat by a flush. If the opponent doesn't have queens or jacks, we should have the winner. I call. It's not too surprising to see that the opponent flopped a full house with pocket jacks. Our check on the flop saves us money. I show that pocket aces get cracked in back-to-back hands at the table to lose a few very big pots. For about 30 seconds, we get a nice profit on the session and some wiggle room, but we lose the majority of that immediately. We're still up, only barely though, and I don't want to risk booking a loss after how hard we fought for a win. It's time to rack up.
Unbelievable session. It was a 12-hour marathon session. I was stuck over $4,500 at the low point. I was in for $7,500, and I just thought that I was gonna get completely torched, especially all the way up until that turn card with the ace king versus Brian's pocket kings, but we got the miracle river card. And at that point, we got the stack up to 7K. We were only down 500, and there was no way in hell I was gonna leave stuck $500 after everything that we'd been through. I was gonna stay there for as long as it took. And then we cracked Brian's aces with ace-9 suited in a big pot. And then the stack got all the way up to 9,200. So I was up $1,700 by some miracle. It was over a 6K swing. And then the very next hand, my aces get cracked. So didn't get to enjoy being up 4 figures for more than about a minute. And at that point, the stack was at $7,800, and I was just like, all right, I'm done. It's been such a long day. And if I got stuck again at that point, I would not have been happy. So ended up booking a $290 win, but that $290 feels about as sweet as it gets. And now I gotta just relax, try and unwind a little bit. And it's gonna take me a while because I have a lot of adrenaline and I'm pretty pumped up. But that was just one of the most insane and fun sessions, looking back on it now, that I've played in a long time.
That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite episodes. I mean, just a really, really long session, battled extremely hard, and ended up coming out with the win. So it was a fun one to share with you guys. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't hit those yet. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. Don't forget to take advantage of the Black Friday sale for pokercoaching.com. I have more information in the description box below with a link that'll get you, up to 70% off. So that's pretty phenomenal. And Thanksgiving's coming up. It had me thinking about all the things that I'm thankful for, and one of the biggest things is just that I'm extremely thankful to be making a career in the poker industry. It's really difficult Years ago, there were a lot more kind of sponsorship opportunities and things like that. And I'm just really grateful to have my spot with WPT. We have our WPT Premier Meetup game coming up December 1st. That's going to be a blast. More information in the description box below for that. But you know, I'm just really grateful for you guys for watching the vlog for 7 years now. It's been a phenomenal, life-changing ride, and I'm really grateful for the time I've had with my family, not only my immediate family, but my girlfriend and her 2 daughters. And thankful for all the time that I've had with my dad, who would have been 70 today. So if it wasn't for the vlog, then I wouldn't have a ton of memories of him documented, and that's something that is really, really special for me. I wouldn't have started the channel if I didn't want to show him and my mom and a lot of other family and friends what my life was like as a professional poker player, and that, you know, there's a lot of skill involved, and I'm not just some type of degenerate gambler or anything. And my dad, seeing the back and forth that I had with you guys in the comment section, and just seeing how much you guys appreciated the vlogs right from the get-go, meant a lot to him and me and the rest of my family. So thank you very much. I hope you all have great Thanksgivings. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.